I guess the last time we spoke was probably about like a couple weeks before your heart attack. Because I
Oh, okay.
remember we actually, because I made a video on it. I know I sent you, some like the comments I sent you that people were saying about you, like the nice comments and wishing you well. That was maybe like a third of the comments I saw, and I'm sure you got tons and tons from other people. So you're certainly well loved in the industry. But I remember we actually talked about your heart health, just kind of generally speaking,
Yeah.
and then obviously everything happened. So I mean, I think most people know you had a heart attack, and when was that roughly?
May 11th.
May 11th. Okay, so wow, we were actually closer to the year then. Um, and it seemed like, from what I've seen, you're feeling pretty good, right? I mean, I don't know if you've had too many symptoms. The last I remember seeing an update from you, which was maybe a few months back, there was some part of your heart that seemed to have, that has not come back, and your ejection fraction was about 35%. Is that still roughly where you're at?
Yeah, I actually had an appointment yesterday,
Okay.
and I haven't even talked about it with anybody at
Mm.
all until now, actually.
Okay.
So there's this thing. I'm gonna look it up. So I got it right here on a screenshot. It's I've actually never heard this term before, and I was visiting Dr. Serrano. It's called the point of maximal impulse, PMI, point of maximal impulse. And so that's when their doctors are looking at your heart, they can feel the point of maximal impulse, just like
Mm.
it sounds. And it's usually at a location on your heart. And usually it's down around the apex of your left ventricle. So when I had the heart attack, my LAD, my left anterior descending artery, was fully blocked, and it caused damage to that part of my heart, um, which is why my ejection fraction was so low. And so, anyways, when I saw Dr. Serrano yesterday, he he kind of smiled at me and he said, and he described to me the point of maximal impulse was over on the right side where my right ventricle was, which you would expect because it has to work harder with the left ventricle not doing anything.
Right.
And then he said, a few months back, he noticed it kind of moving. And then yesterday, he said it was right over the apex of left ventricle. He said, so that part of your heart is now working. It may not be at 100%, but that tissue is actually working and contracting, or else you couldn't feel that in that spot.
Okay.
So that's very positive news. I haven't had any symptoms for probably, I don't know, 6 months at
Yeah.
least. Probably more than that, actually. But I've been feeling great. And so certainly yesterday, I mean, it would be nice to have a cardiac MRI and things like that to really understand the tissue a little better. But
Yeah.
that was certainly a positive sign, though.
That's awesome, man. That's good to hear. So, wait, was your ejection fraction measured by an echocardiogram, or they did an MRI, or maybe you did
I've
both?
done both.
Yeah, and they were pretty
Yeah, I've
similar.
done both. The cardiac MRI they say is a little bit more accurate.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know the computations are a little more complex, whereas
Yeah.
the echo it's more open to interpretation.
Right.
But it was right after the heart attack, everything was below 30%.
Oh,
And
really? Okay.
so my last checkup, which was in December, it was up to 34%. He said he expected, this was my cardiologist, and he said he expected it to keep climbing and keep going up.
Good.
Um, so,
And you're still, I know some of the medication, obviously, you're probably taking like ubiquinol or CoQ10. I remember at one
yeah,
point you're,
I megadose ubiquinol. I take 600 milligrams a day.
wow.
There's no downside to it. So,
Yeah.
and I take 3 grams of carnitine a day.
Okay.
What else do I take? I take
So take
D-ribose.
ribose. Yeah.
Take 10 grams of that. What else do I take? I think that's it. I mean, obviously I take the baby aspirin and other things like of that nature, but
Yeah.
for my actual heart and ejection fraction, I think ubiquinol or CoQ10, if you can't get a good ubiquinol formula, that and a high dose of L-carnitine and D-ribose are probably about as good as a combination as you're going to get supplement-wise.
Yeah. Yeah. And just for people who, ubiquinol and CoQ10, it's just one's a reduced form, one is not. And so they will say, or at least I've read people say, well, when you're younger, you can take CoQ10. When you're older, you need ubiquinol. But actually, even when I was, I want to say like 26, I took a similar dose of each. Like I did, I think it was like 8 weeks of one washout period, and then 8 weeks of the other. and my CoQ10 blood levels were still, even at 26, 3 times higher with ubiquinol. So I just take ubiquinol, and that's usually what I recommend. Like you said, there's not really much of a downside or any downside other than it's I wouldn't say it's a super expensive supplement, but it's not like a really cheap supplement either. 600 milligrams a day is probably, it gets expensive. But I think it's one of the few supplements that has some robust evidence for it,
Oh, there's tons of evidence for it.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously I don't want to focus on this the whole time, but I'm just curious, medication wise, are you on a beta blocker or an ARB or anything like that?
Yeah, I still take the carvedilol, the beta blocker. I still take a blood thinner, which I'll probably have to take for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Just due to my history.
Right.
And I take lisinopril too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, one thing people might not know, and because obviously people say, well, is it from the lifestyle and the bodybuilding and everything that goes along with that? But you also, I believe both of your parents had heart attacks at young ages. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, my biological mother, I believe, had a heart attack in her 30s.
Wow.
And she died at an early age, but she also had a lot of problems. She was a drug addict and alcoholic, so that could have been a part of it too. My dad, who I never met, I was always told he had a pacemaker when he was in his 40s, and he died at a young age too. So that's what I was told.
Yeah.
When I was trying to understand my family history, that's what I was told.
Right. Yeah, and obviously a lot of this stuff, it comes down to genetics and environment, right? It's very hard to rule out, maybe a perfect lifestyle would have avoided it, but obviously some people are just more predisposed to it. I mean, I know you're on something like the bodybuilding forums, and you see that stuff all the time where, maybe somebody didn't know they had a clotting condition or something, and then maybe something in the bodybuilding lifestyle makes that show up, right? And it's very hard to distinguish it. But I'm sure everybody's very glad to hear you're doing well. It sounds like you're still training very intensely, right? I mean, and I've seen some of your
very
videos.
Hard.
Yeah,
I train very hard.
And I guess obviously your doctors have signed off on that being not an issue.
No, I mean, a strong heart is a good thing. And I do my cardio too. Obviously there's 2 different sets of adaptations from weight training and cardio, which are both good for your heart. He wants me to train hard, and so I do. It's really hard to even get me out of breath though. I mean, really? I feel like I'm in pretty good shape.
That's good. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I immediately changed the cardiologist because they were like, well, I just don't think anybody should lift heavy. And I was like, what, you mean like with a heart condition? Like, no, just anybody, like not more than like 100 pounds. And I was like, what? Like based on what? Like, almost every study.
That's pretty silly.
Yeah, it was really silly. Like I immediately switched doctors, but almost every study shows, even with relatively intense weight training, that there's benefits to the heart. I mean, if you're like, actually like severe heart failure, there's going to be some contraindications. But for most people, almost every study is in favor of it. So.
Yeah, I mean, they're a little worried about the Valsalva maneuver and all this stuff, but generally speaking, that's pretty bad advice.
Yeah.